This Sunday on Part 2 of this intervention, get ready for more education.
Well, there's a principle in law that no one is above the rule of law.
Garth and Natasha welcome police officer and attorney at law for the SIU, Zaheer Ali, who will educate you on the laws which speak to drug use in public, possession of and trafficking in dangerous drugs in Trinidad and Tobago, and
This Sunday, on episode 30 of Dependency, reality radio at its best.
Last week, you heard from the Special Investigations Unit of the TTPS as they demonstrated the long list of dangerous drugs available to our children.
Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Happy Sunday to you, and welcome to Dependency right here on I-95.5 FM. Live on the Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel. Good morning, Natasha.
Good morning, Garth. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. And thank you again for joining us this Sunday morning as we share some more information with you from the Special Investigations Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service through Corporal Zaheer Ali, who has joined us in studio this morning, and he has some really valuable information to share. And of course, we'll be asking him questions about related issues to get his take on it. And we know how much you enjoyed the education. The school was in session in July last week, and we know how much you enjoyed, and we didn't even have enough time to complete the presentation that the officers we had in last week were here to present, but we're gonna take it from a slightly different angle this morning.
Yes, and we're going to touch on some very pertinent issues. For instance, your son or daughter has drugs in the home, police raid, you getting locked up or not? Laws governing dangerous drugs, there are significant changes as well to the law as and rehabilitation of offenders, and especially selling drugs or to minors, or giving minors drugs in school. All of these things we're going to touch on. And last week, remember, when we also want to thank, of course, Commissioner of Police and the head of the SIU, Mr. Pamponet, for having Mr. Gift and Mr. Gillard in studio with us last week. Mm-hmm. Was very informative. And you would not believe, our work begins when we come off the air, because we've gotten a lot of calls for people who they need help, especially their children. Mm-hmm. So at least something is coming out of what we're doing. And this week, we're going to look at the laws surrounding substance abuse and it's related to, as it used to the drugs. And also, we're going to share with you, again, we have a video to show you as well. The officer here could pronounce on it. We're talking about date rape drugs. We have a video to show you about a young lady who was almost drugged. Somebody slipped a drug in her drink, but he was caught. And, what happened to him, we still to find out. And that happened outside of Trinidad and Tobago. But that's a warning to those of you who love to party and have a good time and leave your drinks unattended. Thankfully, she was filming herself, and the drink was in front of her, and the stupid guy still tried to drop the pill in the drink.
And strangely enough, she didn't even notice what had happened. She was actually reacting to drink being spilled and another drink being spilled. And strangely enough, well, not strangely enough, because this is the norm, that she was blamed for what happened. Yeah.
And actually, when he realized he was caught, he tipped the drink over on her. So to make it look like it was an accident. So after looking back at the video, then they realized he tried to drug her. Yep. And for those of you who partied and woke up the next day, can't remember what happened last night, but you're feeling bruised, something must have happened to you, all right? Because this is what some date rape drugs do. They wipe your memory clean. And there was an arrest at a nightclub in Trinidad here with someone carrying a firearm. We'll discuss that too and ask the officers' advice on firearm holders and club owners all the way forward. And if we have time, we again going to shine the spotlight. We followed a conversation of a bank customer going to a bank. And with all the reports of people being robbed after leaving banks, you would think that banks would take some form of some step to up their security and the way they do business. And she was faced with a teller on the phone.
While attending to
the customers. That should be a no-no now. Why should tellers have access to phones in front of them? Instead of having a phone in the middle of the bank, a central position, they have it by them. And you know what were they discussing? Part of the discussion was, girl, why you just buy your thing?
I just grow my own.
And I'm sure it in Dashin she was talking about.
Correct.
So, and this is when we highlighted to you all that in all walks of life, in a perfect world, no bank workers would be using drugs. In a perfect world. But we don't live in a perfect world. And I don't have to reveal everything I know, but I'm telling you that there are a number of people struggling with gambling, alcohol, and cocaine addiction. And they work in all aspects of life in Trinidad and Tobago, all areas. And if we're trying to bury our heads in the sand with that, then I'm sorry. We're going to pay the consequences. All right? So, without further ado, we're going to take this break. And when we return, you're going to hear of this brilliant attorney we have in studio here with us this morning. You would see him on Beyond the Tape on a Wednesday, giving some very valuable contributions and to helping us understand the law. The name of the segment is Corporal. The name of the segment is on the law. On Beyond the Tape. The name of the segment.
Legally speaking.
Legally speaking. That's the name of the segment. And as you would know, and I'm sure you would concur, that he's one of the brilliant minds we have in this country when it comes to the law. Respect him a lot, and we're happy to have him here in studio with us this morning. Tasha?
Yes, and one other thing that I wanted to bring up, if we have time, is the video that about cannabis edibles being sold on social media, and what are the repercussions for that? What is the possible fallout in terms of underage persons having access to this drug? We know it has been decriminalized, but certain aspects of the law, and we touched on this a little bit last week with Mr. Gift and Mr. Gillade, in terms of how the law does not cover certain aspects of cannabis use and sale. So if we have time this morning, we'll touch on that as well.
Right. So let's go to that break quickly. And when we return, we will speak with Mr. Ali in studio with us, Officer Ali. And this is for your guidance this morning, folks. Please pay attention. We'll be back.
Hello?
Hello, Mr. Dobson here from HMP London. Can I speak to Mr. James, please?
This is Mr. James speaking.
Thank you. Can you hold the line? I have a call coming through for you, sir.
Sure.
Hello, Daddy.
Hello, yes, Brian?
Daddy, I'm just calling to tell you that locked up in the UK for drug trafficking.
Oh, yeah? You lock up? And you tell me I was going to Tobago? And I tell you about them boy I was liming with? Well, all right. Don't drop the soap. Carry on.
Eye on Dependency. Reality radio at its best every Sunday on I 95.5 FM. Don't miss it.
Yes, girl. I'm online here with this weirdo named Larry. I'm getting rid of him now. Let's take a selfie. It looking good, boy. I putting it online.
Hey, I thought you say you went to the beach with your parents.
Who's you?
It's me, Larry. from online.
Ion Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays, at 10 a.m., and exclusively, on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live, on the Ion Dependency Facebook page, and YouTube channel.
Mr. Zaheer Ali is an attorney at law who was called to the bar in 2017. He obtained his Bachelor of Laws degree, LLB, with honours from the University of London in the year 2012 and his Legal Education Certificate, LEC, from the Hugh Wooding Law School in 2017. He's also the holder of a Masters of Law, LLM, degree with distinction from the University of the West Indies. Mr. Ali is a serving member of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service and is currently the legal officer for the Special Investigations Unit, SIU, which focuses on transnational and serious organized crime. He also advises the Counter-Trafficking Unit, CTU, of the Ministry of National Security and the Special Branch Terrorism Interdiction Unit, TIU, in their criminal investigations. Mr. Ali is a former student of the Harvard Coaching Clinic and a former national senior cricketer, which I'm sure many of you did not know, and a former West Indies youth captain who participated in 2 youth cricket World Cups in England and Sri Lanka. In 2013, he founded and legally established the Zaheer Ali Foundation, which is a non-profit NGO committed to youth and community development in Trinidad and Tobago, through various initiatives in the areas of sport, health, and educational workshops, among others. Mr. Ali is currently co-host of the segment Legally Speaking on Beyond the Tape on a Wednesday between 5:30 and 7 p.m.
And we are very happy to have him in our presence here this morning. And let's get right. Good morning, sir, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, God. Good morning, Natasha. Good morning to Trinidad and Tobago. Good morning to members of my family. And most importantly, the topic that we're about to discuss. Good morning to the children of Trinidad and Tobago. Garth and Natasha, let me begin by not only stating that it's a pleasure and privilege to be here this morning, but also to acknowledge and commend the work of Ion Dependency. Just in our build-up to the discussions leading to this particular interview, I myself did some research. And when you have programs that are identifying and selecting topics like what we are about to discuss, you all have to be acknowledged and commended for the initiative. You all to continue along those lines. I know you all have dealt with other very sensitive topics that are definitely required for the development and prosperity of Trinidad and Tobago. So I thought it was important to echo those sentiments this morning in relation to the topic that we are about to discuss and other related topics. To my fellow citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, I hope that you will sit back, listen carefully, and I will strongly advise that you pull your children along to listen to the next couple minutes or hours of this particular discussion.
Thank you very much for your kind sentiments, and we accept that in wholeheartedly. We thank you so much. So let's jump right into it, Mr. Ali. The reasons for laws governing dangerous drugs. Tell us about that. Elaborate on that a bit for us, please.
Well, an excellent way to start, Garth. In any topic that we are discussing, or we hope to discuss, it's always important to understand why or what's the concept behind legislating the control, and I'm using the word the control of the narcotic drug and the psychotropic substances. Why it is important that we legislate to control those drugs and substances respectively. Now let me begin looking at the United Nations and looking from an international law perspective, and to further expand on how important this topic is. In the international law, the world United Nations recognize that there's a magnitude, there's serious threat and impact if these particular drugs, dangerous drugs, and the psychotropic substances are not controlled. And we can look at it from a multifaceted way it do not only affect society, it affects the political arena, it affects the children of the nation, it affects the financial aspect, it affects the economic aspect. And I want to draw the analysis on this point here from a national security perspective. We have seen, or we have noticed, or the intelligence have suggested that some of the most serious organized and gang crimes in Trinidad and Tobago, one of the issues that are motivating or leading to these sort of fallout is drug thefts. And if we are not careful and we are not decisive in our actions in fighting this drug and this drug trade, you're going to find that gangs are going to be continuing to perpetrate the violent attacks that we are seeing in society. So drugs is one of the elements that are spiraling gang violence based on the intelligence, based on what I've seen. And hence why it's important for the international community recognize that there's a need to look at this particular issue and to ensure that every state or every member of the United Nations legislate in order to control this. Having said that, we have in our law books in Trinidad and Tobago the Dangerous Drugs Act, Chapter 1125 as amended. And I'll also identify just subtly another section of the Children's Act in Trinidad and Tobago which speaks to a certain extent in terms of the control of this particular drug. So I just wanted to begin by emphasizing where this has originated from and where the domestic arrangement was influenced by international law. Finally, before I hand back to you, Natasha and Garth, if you just look at the context of narcotics and psychotropic substances, immediately you will see things like it's going to affect the mood and behavior. It's going to affect the mental state. So could you imagine a human being whose mental state is affected and an opportunity presents itself to that particular individual who is not coherent, who is not stable? Or could you imagine that person gets possession of an illegal firearm? I do have to go and say exactly what are the possible consequences or outcome. So once you have a drug that is affecting the mind, which is the most sensitive part of the human being, you know they say in law that you might have actus reus elements or conduct any part of an element. But if there is no intention, that person normally, most of the times, they normally is spared from the consequences because intention is very serious and must accompany an actual act on the part of a human being. So because of that significance, that impact, I thought was the international committee, and the domestic arrangement definitely recognize an urgent need to legislate. So hence, that in itself encapsulate the whole perspective and the concept by the regulation or the controlling of these particular dangerous drug and psychotropic substances.
Now to follow up from that, Corporal, there are certain substances which are legal in the legal sense, such as alcohol, and certain other substances like cannabis, which are becoming less and less criminalized in that sense. And of course, certain countries where all drugs, whether hard or soft, are decriminalized. Do you think that there's a trend towards reducing harm rather than criminalizing drug use? And we understand the impact on the criminal element and how drugs are being used to finance criminal activity. But do you think that the world is moving towards a more harm reduction approach rather than a criminalizing approach?
I think it's a very, very good question. Just to look at the comparison between the Dangerous Drug Act and the recent, I want to use the word recent, 2019 amendment. What you found with those two particular legislation is, and in the context of cannabis, there was in fact a shift from cannabis being one of the dangerous drugs and a decriminalization of certain amounts and a number of trees. So just by way of example, that in itself would have recognized that the legislators had a shift in terms of how they are considering particular drugs. Secondly, in that shift between the Dangerous Drug Act and the amendment, you also saw more fines that are generated for contraventions as opposed to custodial sentence. So to answer that question, I think that that it's a balanced approach in my respectful view that has been adopted, recognizing that persons may be influenced or may be exposed, but when they are exposed to influence, we ought to be careful that we're not only looking at the punitive side of it, but looking at more rehabilitation, and we'll speak as we go along with this context. So I think it's a brilliant question. Yes, we have see a shift, but only in the context in Trinidad with the cannabis issue. Now, you raise the issue with alcohol. And while alcohol in itself is not caught within the dangerous drugs, I want to bring this point on, and maybe the legislators, maybe stakeholders may start looking at this as a probably ways for reform as well. If you look at how that Children's Act is identified and described, they have exposing a child to a dangerous drug, but then it went further to say, or a drug that may have a similar effect. So could we argue that, okay, if someone is not careful in terms of how much they are consuming, could you imagine what that may have an influence in terms of the mind as well? So just by way of argument, I think that is definitely an area that we need to look at in terms of looking at having that basically free for all in relation to where alcohol is concerned, because it can also have very far-reaching consequences. I don't want to be prejudicial, but someone who consumes a lot of alcohol, yes, we have the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, may talk about breathalyzer and so forth, but still the fact is a person have the liberty to drink with negligence, with ignorance, and then now being in charge of a vehicle. Could you imagine how much persons may be exposed to danger and risk? So I think it's a beautiful question, Natasha.
And drink how much he or she wants. Any day, any time.
That's correct.
And and that harm reduction that Natasha spoke about, I before we move on to the next question, I know in New Zealand and one of two other countries, they started doing harm reduction by distributing needles to people who do intravenous drug use, take drugs intravenously. And they started sharing needles because they have points where you can go and pick up your needle rather than use discarded needles, because they realized the HIV, it was spiraling.
Hepatitis.
Yeah, was spiking hepatitis and all of these things. So that is part of the harm reduction journey.
Well, just in terms of when you're looking at the issue of reduction as well, and in my introductory remarks, I commended this program and other programs that are doing similarly. Because under that international direction or guidance as well, apart from legislating to create custodial sentence and very steep fine, you also had advice from the international committee that talks about building awareness, having workshops. So it also look at a preventative perspective as well.
Correct.
And hence why I commended this program, because I think it's important that, yes, we are doing some work from a national context, but there's always room for improvement. There's always room to take it closer to the persons that are most vulnerable. So I think that, it's a very, very, very sensitive topic, and that social intervention approach is just as important as the hard enforcement of the particular legislation.
And we thank you for joining us this morning. Those of you who are joining us on social media, we welcome you, as usual, to our usual and faithful followers and listeners. We thank you very much. We are speaking with a familiar voice. You would hear him. You see him on Beyond the Tape on a Wednesday. And he's here with us this morning to lend his time, and we really appreciate it. And, of course, we thank Ms. Joanne Archie as well for setting this up for us, too. So we thank you, ma'am. And we will have this very important discussion this morning. As you heard, parents especially, please pay attention. Now, Mr. Ali, the laws that surrounds controlling dangerous drugs in Trinidad and Tobago, what are the laws, and including amendments, if there are any?
Okay, just to move slowly. Under the primary, or the Originating Dangerous Drugs Act, we had the prevalent offenses that person will be familiar with, like the simple possession. And now with the amendment, you have a simple possession is no longer will be whether 30 grams. Now that has been decriminalized. So person who having 30 grams and under, now that is viewed as a legal amount that they can have. But before, you had simple possession, which didn't speak to an amount. You had possession for the purpose of trafficking. You had trafficking. And let me just break that term, trafficking. When we speak about trafficking, whether possession for the purpose or the actual trafficking in a dangerous drug, what you're really looking at is you're looking at accessorial elements of persons engaging in sale, person transporting, person exporting, person importing, person administering. So there's a lot of words that can come in to describe when we speak about trafficking. So, for example, Natasha had, before the amendment, had 100 grams of cannabis. Well, let me be a little more precise. Natasha had 1 kilogram of marijuana.
Right.
And now marijuana, now the amendment clearly put it into, and I want to use the word this morning, cannabis and going forward. So had 1 kilogram of cannabis. And now in a police surveillance see that she's engaging Natasha, Garth, in exchange for money and exchange for the drugs. So right then, based on the status of affair, she didn't only possessing the particular drug, but she was engaging in a sale, which brings into the realm of possession for the purpose of trafficking. And in that situation that I described, without the possession, or a straight trafficking, because there's evidence of the sale, exchange of money, and the exchange of the drug. So we had those prevalent offenses. Now, from a trafficking context, the law had even gone as far to say, okay, if you have 10 grams of cocaine, you are deemed to have it for the purpose of trafficking. If you had 20 grams of heroin, you're deemed to have it for the purpose of trafficking. You had 30 grams of morphine. Similarly, you had it for the purpose of trafficking. 500 grams of opium, you had it for the purpose of trafficking. 1 kilogram of cannabis, or now with the amendment, 165 grams of cannabis resin, you are deemed to have it for trafficking. So now why am I identifying that, Natasha and Garth? It really demonstrates and brings alive why the law was so precise, where persons who are going to possess these amounts, they actually place very strict penalties, because a simple possession as compared to a trafficking or possession for the purpose of trafficking will have varied sentence and varied fines. So hence why they were so punitive, if I should say, in terms of even deeming persons, whether there is no evidence of actual sale, but once you have by virtue of weight, you were deemed to have it for the purpose of trafficking.
No, here's the rub. Marijuana was decriminalized. And we started this discussion last week, where we threw on the table that if I am a homeowner, I have 4 children, and 4 of them decide they want to plant 4 marijuana trees. Now, let me tell you, in our humble view, I think, and we're speaking about amendments, I think they should relook this one and amend these laws to say each household should only have 4 trees in their yard, rather than each individual is entitled to 4 trees, right? So you'll tell us if that is possible.
Well, let me get into that immediately, Garth.
Sure.
I think that you have touched a very sensitive point, and I want to thank you for touching that. I have not shared with you or Natasha prior to coming to this interview, but when I hear that position that you have taken, it tells me that we are not alone in our discussion in terms of where the amendment. And let me say respectfully here, and I'm going to just disclose a little bit. There is or are, in fact, discussions that are ongoing with the necessary authorities under the Attorney General's office. I myself, together with officers, have identified that there may be some gaps where the amendment is concerned. And I would not go this morning to identify the gap for various reasons.
Correct.
But I want to agree with you that there is, in fact, or there are gaps in the legislation that ought to be addressed and ought to be addressed immediately. So, by way of example, where you have just suggested that it should be 4 trees per home. And I will not engage you to identify why you may have indicated that, because I myself have also fleshed that out in my mind to understand how that can be a mischief if we are not careful. So I want to agree with you totally that there are in fact areas or gaps in the legislation that need addressing, and we are hoping that the authorities at B move swiftly to ensure that the law becomes more certain, it achieves the objective of the legislation or continues to achieve the objective, and it becomes easily workable and enforceable for law enforcement.
Yeah.
Agreed. I mean, we, as you rightly say, it is leaving the gap open for mischief, because anyone who has adult children or adult relatives living in their home, if they have six adults in the home, then they can have 6 times 4 plants.
Yeah.
And just to share something, sorry to disturb you, Natasha. I know you were on your well, I wouldn't say on your legs, but but you were speaking. But I want to just share something just to ground that point, Garth and Natasha. I think it's an important point. With the law and balancing the equation, okay, we went and we decriminalized cannabis, where we have given persons a certain amount that they can enjoy. Now that enjoyment of that certain amount, that 30 grams and under, or 5 grams of cannabis resin, or the 4 trees that a person is allowed, 4 trees per person, and we are just the 4 trees in a while. Should we have gone, and this is a suggestion now looking at some reform, should we have gone to emphasize how that particular 30 grams or that 4 tree should be handled and managed? If we are speaking about the welfare of children, and if the Children's Act speak about a person, and I'm going to quote our offense here, must not expose a child to a dangerous drug.
Thank you.
Or a drug that may have a similar effect, won't we have wanted to say, okay, while I'm going to now decriminalize a certain amount, there are certain conditions I'm going to impose. So, for example, let's link when a person has a FUL, a Firearm User's License. The Firearms Act is clear as to that firearm should not be within the reach of children. So, should we have now emphasized that when you have 30 grams, don't let it be exposed on a couch. Don't let it be exposed on a TV where a child can now pick up, consume, especially if children are on their own. So, I think from a legislative context, from a policy position, if we are really serious about protecting our children in Trinidad and Tobago, if we are want to bring legislation into alignment, you cannot or you should not have a potential conflict between the Children's Act saying do not expose a child to a dangerous drug and the amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act saying that a person is allowed to have 30 grams, but there's no specifics or no conditions imposed on that individual as to the management and handling of that particular drug. Let me just switch immediately to the 4 trees. Similarly, if you have 4 trees in a home per person, and God, I know that you're smiling with this one because I know we're finding commonality here in terms of your perspective, that we have 4 trees per person. Could you imagine a household has 16 adults?
Thank you.
Then what we have now cultivation. We have cultivation.
Yeah.
And so, I am very optimistic that yes, we need to adopt some balance. There's some studies in terms of the benefits of cannabis. I am not going to go at the different stakeholders who have advocated for that, but I'm saying in the context, I think it's a law that we need to be very careful. It needs to be very carefully thought out to ensure that it's not conflicting with other legislation or other objectives in which the Dangerous Drug Act and its amendment and the international law was intended to protect.
Yeah, and well said. Thank you. And this could have a lot of spin-offs because when we cultivate these trees and we end up with all this marijuana, we now could go into business. We could make brownies and cookies and sell. We could give a child cannabis to carry in school to sell because we'll have a humongous amount of cannabis on your hands.
That leads to my other point in regard to the production of the drug. If you are allowed to have 4 trees as an adult in Trinidad and Tobago, where are you getting the seeds or the seedlings to plant these seeds? You have to buy it from somebody, right?
And Natasha, another brilliant question.
Yes, are you selling seeds?
Well, I will immediately dismiss that this morning, Gat and Natasha. We live in a society that if I don't dismiss it immediately,
yes,
we might find that someone listening say, you know what? SIU is subject to a criminal investigation.
They calling you and Alexander.
So I want to dismiss that immediately. But again, a brilliant point that if you now have granted persons the opportunity to possess 30 grams, it means now that there will be a demand for it.
Yes.
And the question is, you're speaking about supply. Correct. So again, another excellent area that we need to address. But just to go back into the context of the 4 trees, and while there's an offense of cultivating, let me identify that, God. While there's an offense of cultivating, and while the offense is clear in terms of where if you have more than 30 grams, and there's a tier system between 30 and 60, and then between 60 and 100, which will also attract a criminal fine, if I should say that, between 60 and 30 to 60, sorry, and 60 to 100. And then with the cannabis resin, we have, I think, from my recollection, we have 5 to 10 and then 10 to 14
right.
grams.
Yes.
The fact of the matter is that with having 4 trees per person, and I use the example 14 persons or 14 adults in a home, the question is, if you were to now make use of those trees, when you are each person above the 30 grams, what you're going to do with the remainder?
Thank you.
Where you're going to store the remainder? And there goes the mischief, that now you will be naturally in possession of more than 30 grams of cannabis.
Yes.
So it's something that we need to think about. Again, I think that issue with the seeds is an excellent area as well. And it's definitely an area for us to look at reform. And while I didn't disclose it, I see you all have already identifying particular areas to me. And I hope that my colleagues in the various positions that are responsible for law reform, for policy positions, are listening to us this morning in the public's interest.
Yes, I sincerely hope so. And if you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and we are speaking with Mr. Zaheer Ali, attorney at law. You hear him and see him on Beyond the Tape every Wednesday. Very, very interesting program with, of course, with Superintendent Alexander and Marlon Hopkinson. But he's here with us this morning, lending his time. And he can lay it out. He can throw down, and we have him here this morning. We're grateful for that. So thank you for elaborating on that, sir.
If I may, can we show that video, B. Shortman, about the cannabis edibles? Because this is another concern of ours in terms of the now accessibility of cannabis especially to young people, and the fact that, and it also kind of dovetails into the issue of the sale and purchase of cannabis products. This is, when we get the video B. Shortman, this is an example of how cannabis edibles are being sold on Instagram. Now this is a video.
Now we've seen a pack of Cheetos, right?
Right.
And these are infused Cheetos. Now you see Cheetos in your child's bag, you think it's harmless, right?
Yep.
But let's look at this.
Looney juice.
I saw this. I sent it to Miss Archie to find out,
And these clearly are being imported, right? $100 for a bag of infused Cheetos, and they're also selling what they're calling looney juice, which is infused juice. They say, I think is 1 gram of HG, which I assume is high grade, and this is all, of course, THC, because I'm sure this is not for medicinal purposes, so it's not CBD. Right.
And as I said, you open your child's bag, and so you see they're doing succession planning, because this is what we're showing you here, folks. So those of you who are on with us on Facebook and YouTube, this is what is being marketed to our children, because unless somebody has the munchies, they're not buying Cheetos.
Yeah.
Just like that.
And this is another of the gaps, because I'm sure it is probably not illegal to do this.
So
I mean, I don't know.
Mr. Ali?
Well,
over to you.
Well, I'm seeing this particular video for the first time, so I don't want to prematurely comment on it. But what I will say, generally speaking, is that when we are speaking dangerous drug, and I know my colleagues may have mentioned it last week Sunday, that there are persons or there are even corporate entities who, whether intentionally or unintentionally, will be using attractive, convenient, and effective ways to be able to have drugs contained in food items and drink and so forth. So I think it's something that we need to look at very carefully, and even the Ministry of Health, while we are looking at a TTPS, Ministry of National Security context in terms of the enforcement of the Dangerous Drugs Act, I think the Ministry of Health also has an important responsibility to look at the food and drink that is basically coming to our society who are already here, and especially where the vulnerable society will be exposed to or attracted to. I think we need to look at those things very carefully to ensure that there is no innovative way that our children or the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are consuming drug through or portraying to be food and drink, when really is the dangerous drug that they are putting into their bodies, and obviously becoming addicted and do not know why they are behaving in the way that they are behaving. So
correct.
Probably I'll share a further perspective when I get a deeper look at the video, Natasha and Gar.
Right, so we'll show it again, folks. And those of you, I see people saying they have an internet problem. So if you can join us on YouTube, then if you're having problems, I don't know why these Sunday mornings are having problems with the feed on Facebook, but you can join us on YouTube if you're having that issue. All right, so and in studio we have Mr. Ali, attorney at law for the Special Investigation Unit for Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and Mr. James Filbert sends his regards, Mr. Ali.
All right.
He said his pleasant morning to you.
Well, that's an esteemed, distinguished former Commissioner of Police who I had the privilege of working with. So to you, former Acting Commissioner James Filbert, or I normally refer to him as James Anthony Filbert, pleasant morning to you, sir. And to the other former commissioners and our present Commissioner of Police as well, knowing that we are in the Commissioner of Police discussion this morning. Good morning to each and every one of you all, and by extension, all police officers in Trinidad and Tobago, both current and former.
Yes, and in a while we're going to show you those police officers in action. They arrested someone at a nightclub recently with a legal firearm, and how the brother was carrying on was totally mind-blowing. But let's move quickly, because time flies here when we have lots of information for you. Now, what is or are some of the significant changes to the law as it stood previously?
Well, we were highlighting a few by way of the question that you asked. But just to highlight and just to expand on it, the shift from the Dangerous Drug Act 1125 and the Amendment Act number 24 of 2019, what it did, and we were speaking about it, it decriminalized certain amounts of cannabis. It also allowed for, and the issue that we discussed a while ago, 4 trees per person. But the significant thing from my respectful view with that particular amendment, it shifted the balance from looking at custodial sentence to fines. And I think that was significant in the context of where there has been a lot of argument that persons may be remanded in custody for possession or even possession for the purpose of trafficking. And what I've seen in the amendment is that us lean to the side of not custodial sentence, but hefty fines. May I also say as well, Garth, I also see an expressed position by the legislators that in the case where persons are not, and I want to stretch this point a little bit because I think it's another area that we need to reform. The law went to identify that when a person is unable or fail to pay the fine that is imposed by the amendment, they are directed to perform community service, whether it be 30 hours or whether it be 50 hours.
Yes.
Now, I have a very, very serious issue with that. And the way the law has worded, unable to or fail to, shouldn't one ask the question as to what are the circumstances that a person is unable to or did not pay the fine? So it mustn't be a situation where, okay, you are the sanction is handed down, but you easily neglected to pay it with no justifiable reasons, but yet you are going to do community service. So I think it's an area where once you're culpable, and if you already shifted from a custodial sentence to a fine, we should really, and this is law enforcement and the state, should really try to enforce that fine. And if in such case that person is offshore, well, then we understand that they will go to community service.
Right. Okay.
But if you are not, for example, a person may be charged, and when you look at that person's assets, that person may have enjoyed a good life by the possession and trafficking and sale, but at a point in time they were charged for an offense. Should I pursue their assets? Should I look to reintegrate some of their assets where, and this may bring me into the Proceeds of Crime Act, whether they, and we also have the Unexplained Wealth Act that is partly proclaimed, that we can also use to really determine whether in fact a person really have the ability to pay or not, whether they benefited from the crime or not, as opposed to just saying, okay, you're unable to pay or you haven't paid the fine, community service. I think it's an area that we need to look carefully at,
right,
so we don't allow persons to go free to say, well, okay, I committed a serious offense, but here it is, I'm performing 30 hours of community service. Would that really cause the deterrent that we want per se? That's our question this morning.
And speaking of which, Mr. Filbert was part of that bringing down an empire, and it showed what happened to the proceeds of that person's, to what was used, what the state did to after bringing home. And I'm speaking of Abdul Shady. And what happened to his estate and what it was turned into, unfortunately, is shut down now. I don't know why.
We're talking about tremendous amounts of money and assets.
Yes.
Which the state should be able to seize and the citizens should be able to benefit from in some way.
Yeah, I don't think that we, and again, it calls for alignment of legislation, Natasha and Garth. All I'm saying is that if someone commits a criminal offense, yes, it may have attracted a fine. Yes, you have moved it from a custodial sentence to a fine. But it cannot be an easy way where if a person is unable or does not pay the fine, that you have the opportunity for community service. No, I am saying that look at the significance of that person's criminal conduct on society.
Right.
Look at that person's assets to really determine whether that person had the capacity to pay or not. So if those things are fleshed out and we end up with the person being identified a person offshore, okay, fine. Go to the 30 hours or the 50 hours as the case may be. Right. But I think that it should be properly and carefully thought out to ensure that we achieve the deterrent that we want, so that person would not be engaging in that conduct in moving forward. If we are just allowing it for community service, I think it's too much of a soft approach with such a serious matter.
Now, Karen King on Facebook is asking, what does community service entail?
Well, under the Community Service Order Act, the judicial officer has a wide discretion in terms of what society may be in urgent need of. So, for example, you may have a situation where the person is ordered to report to, let's say, the regional corporation to assist in landscaping. You may have a situation where the person may report to a particular NGO who may be involved in youth and community development. So they are now finding and dedicating their time in a positive way to compensate society for their criminal conduct or how they may have negatively impacted the society. So it's really an inherent rehabilitation tool, but also finding a way for the person to give back to society as a means of understanding and to appreciate that what he or she may have done, that they should not have done it, and you're still having society benefit in some way. So there was a situation where persons are convicted, Garth, and they serve a sentence. If there's no proper rehabilitation process in serving a sentence, you haven't changed the mind.
Thank you.
You haven't changed the thoughts.
Yes. There you go.
So if you have a person doing community service, you are starting to think rehabilitation, you're starting to think positivity. But all I'm saying is that whilst I endorse that particular approach to reach the community service with a person who have committed a criminal offense where the penalty may have been very heavy, do not go to community service if you have not explored the person's ability to pay.
Right.
Because you have not really disarmed or really affected that person's pocket.
Yes.
And we do not know, well, in fact, 30 hours, the person goes back into the criminal conduct because he or she have the means.
Right.
So that's the point I'm making. But I am not ruling out the community service, but I think it has to be on a systematic approach in arriving at community service.
But on that note, Corporal, what are your views then on the drug treatment courts as a means of diverting drug users, not traffickers, drug users to treatment rather than to prison?
Beautiful question. Beautiful, beautiful question. And if we are speaking rehabilitation, and I must admit that the law, as one of the amendments, have clearly identified placing squarely on the judicial officer. I wouldn't say a duty, but a discretion to consider that before sentencing, that is important for that person to be assessed so that you will know what sort of investment that you require to give to that person. And it's very important because could you imagine, Garth and Natasha, that someone is convicted, about to be sentenced. Let's say in this case that it was a custodial sentence. And you have no idea how that drug would have impacted that mental state. And you are putting that person now in a bigger environment with other persons. That in itself can be what? A health risk.
Yes.
So if you are not careful as to the individual that you are dealing with, then you might end up with some consequences. So I want to agree with you that the assessment is just as important. And even if persons are not convicted, Garth, a proactive approach, the fact that you have been charged and placed before a court, in the findings, even if you are found not guilty, I think that the law should go as far to say, okay, if there's admittance of being exposed to the drug, that there at least should be a proactive measure to say, okay, at least in part of the proceedings that you be assessed. Because we can now be allowing someone to go back out into the society. Again, we talk about drugs affecting the mental state, behavior, emotions. So how do you really do justice to a situation when someone who has been exposed to a dangerous drug comes to the domain or comes to before the judicial officers? I think it has to be a 360 approach to ensure that we are really effectively working the legislation. The way the legislation is, and as I must indicate that the amendment did emphasize the need for psychiatric assessment by the psychiatric hospital director. Yeah. So that I don't know if that supports the point that you were asking in terms of proper assessment of the individual.
Yes, indeed. And also taking more of a restorative rather than a punitive approach to sentencing.
Well, I like the two beautiful words that you have used. I will just like to build a bridge between both so that there's a balance between both. And I see you smile with that.
This is why we introduced drug treatment course to Trinidad and Tobago. Yep. So we're not part of the process, but we hope that it's doing what it's intended. If you're just joining us, Shortman, could you line up video B as we go to our break? As after you play the video, you could go straight to the break. For those of you who just joining us, just wanted to see what is on Facebook and what's prepared, because these guys, they're doing succession planning, and you will see in the lineup some infused Cheetos, and we are in studio with Corporal. If you don't have a problem calling you Corporal, serious. I was telling Corporal off, if this man was in the military, he would have been a commissioned officer already. 14 years on the force. Commissioner, hint, with a brains like this, you need this man on the executive. Yeah. with brains like this, please. So, folks, you're listening to Our Independency, and we're going to take a break. But after Shortman show you this video that's floating around on social media with advertising with infused products. You're listening to Our Independency. We'll be right back. Hearing now.
Get my phone.
What are you doing?
We're going to a break. Okay, so we'll be back right after this.
Get my phone.
What are you doing taking them kind of pictures? I'll tell mommy.
And I'll tell her you invaded my privacy.
Privacy? When you send those pics, you lose all privacy. It's like setting up a billboard with your naked pics for the world to see.
Those pictures are for my boyfriend's eyes only, and he'll never do that to me.
Yes, he can, or one of his friends or family, or someone can steal his phone. Sending naked pics can open you up to embarrassment for you, your family, and friends. You can be harassed by bullies. Your pics can be uploaded to websites and seen by everybody, even the wrong people, sex offenders. It can also affect you getting a good job in the future. Once those pictures go out, you can never get them back.
Okay, I'll tell my boyfriend to delete them, and I'll delete these. I'm glad I have a smart little sister.
I'm still telling mommy.
The government of Trinidad and Tobago, through the National Task Force Against Trafficking in Persons, continues to develop and implement effective policies and procedures to prevent and suppress human trafficking. To date, the National Task Force has developed 2 national plans of action against the crime of trafficking in persons. Trinidad and Tobago adopts a 4-pronged approach in its response to human trafficking. 1. Effective identification of victims and witnesses. 2. Prevention of human trafficking. 3. Protection of victims and witnesses. And 4. Prosecution of suspected traffickers. In the Ministry of National Security, we established a specialized unit called the Counter-Trafficking Unit to lead and manage Trinidad and Tobago's response to human trafficking. The Counter-Trafficking Unit works closely with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Immigration Division, and international law enforcement agencies to aggressively and proactively investigate and prosecute suspected human traffickers. Human trafficking is a serious crime. Rest assured, the government of Trinidad and Tobago and its agencies remain committed in the fight against human trafficking and will respond with immediate effect when the need arises.
We are the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security, Trinidad and Tobago, safeguarding human life.
Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio, at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays, at 10 a.m., and exclusively, on I-95.5 FM.
And streamed live, on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page, and YouTube channel.
Thank you very much for staying with us. If you've joined us on radio or online on our Facebook page or YouTube channel, and if you're having issues on Facebook, please join us on our YouTube channel, and I posted the link in the chat.
Yes, thank you very much for staying with us. And so, Mr. Ali, and I've seen people got arrested. There was a story of some workers from the corporation in the market, and they were sitting around and they were smoking a joint. And some people tend to think because it's decriminalized, I've seen a guy walking around with a roll-on in his mouth, normal and drinking. So what are some of the offenses and penalties surrounding this
dangerous drugs?
Okay, so just to extend on some of the additional offenses that members of the public need to be aware of, and let's go straight to that point that you raised, Garth, in terms of smoking in public.
Yes.
Or using cannabis in public, or cannabis resin, as the case may be, in a public place. That's a very, very serious offense. And serious offense in the context of, again, we have $50,000, and again, the amendment tend to move away from the custodial sentence. So you have hefty fines followed by community service. That's smoking in public. I want to emphasize that the decriminalization of the 30 grams, it was given for your personal, and I'm expressing this word, your personal use, your personal consumption. Once you're attributing personal consumption, it cannot, and the law clearly speaks about using it in public. So you already gotten the opportunity where it was decriminalized to enjoy your 30 grams. Where here it is now, you have rolled your 30 grams into a cigarette and you're in the public domain smoking it. The law has totally prohibited that. This should not be a situation where it's a form of marketing or exposing the drug. It's for your personal consumption and not to be in public. So I want to immediately identify in the law speaks clearly about smoking in public.
So a police can arrest you if you're standing by a taxi stand, you're driving your car, you have a roll-on in your mouth, the police can arrest you for smoking.
That's the other thing is if you're smoking in your car, is that considered a public place?
Well, Natasha, you are very, very, how I should say, you are very assertive this morning, and I must admit that that's, again, just driving to the studio, and you're responding on the issues. Whether, in fact, in law argument-wise, whether the car is in a public space, but you are within your vehicle.
Correct.
So that, and again, is a very interesting argument. And I would not give a perspective on it, but maybe the lawmakers should be very specific as to that there is no subjective view, but there's a clear pronouncement that even if you are within your car in a public place, that you will be caught within the legislation.
Right.
So, but again, an excellent point that you are making. Maybe I should, Garth, I'll have to ask you to get the support of Natasha when I'm advocating for law reform in this particular area, because she's actually identifying some areas that we need to look at. So yes, as I say, it's a very sensitive area and we need to look at it in a balanced way. But smoking in public, definitely prohibited under the law. Another area that I want to identify, Garth, is the area of, and this is a very important area that I want members of the public, and this is for the professionals in Trinidad and Tobago. On one hand, the law has given you an option to use cannabis. We know that an abuse of cannabis can also have consequential effects if you are not liking anything else.
Yes.
Simple as a soft drink. You drink too much, you get diabetes. Right, Garth? Right, Natasha? But in this, but talking about cannabis, which is defined as a dangerous drug, we have given you 30 grams. If you are not careful and you abuse it, there are serious consequences. Now, how did the law respond to that? The law went to the extent that they indicating clearly that, and I'll read this verbatim for you all, persons who are under the influence of cannabis who does anything which constitute negligence or professional practice or professional malpractice or professional misconduct. Let me just repeat those words. Negligence, professional malpractice, or professional misconduct. Now, when you see in those three particular terms, this do not only go and are not being prejudicial to the average man in the society who may be on the playing field, say, you know what, I need to take a smoke, or I need to go home and enjoy my 30 grams, or I need to enjoy after 30 grams, I buy the next 30 again in quick time. It's persons who are also in professional life. So could you imagine, and not being prejudicial to any party, could you imagine that particular stakeholders who will be allowed to enjoy the law? And I'm not going to identify any particular stakeholder, but also have very serious public responsibilities.
Yes.
Persons who can enjoy the drug and have serious responsibilities. Could you imagine that they consume cannabis to the extent that they are making bad judgments? And let me just go into the context where when you talk of negligence, let me go to the driver that I spoke about earlier.
Yes.
You in charge of a motor vehicle and you're going down the public road. But over the last 24 hours, yes, you may have 30 grams, but you know what you did? You consume over 300 grams for the last 12 hours. You are within your domain, within your own dwelling. Nobody is policing that. But it demonstrates to those persons, although you have 30 grams, be careful on your consumption, especially if you have responsibilities to other members of the public, whether it be by virtue of being in charge of a vehicle or an execution of your duties. So that's the first part I want to identify. Secondly, and I read it in verbatim again, person who has cannabis or cannabis resin in his possession or on a school bus or in any school premises where children are present for the purpose of education or attending or participating in any cultural or sporting activities. Now, right there and then, in the beginning of the show, we talk about the international community, saw where children were vulnerable, where the intelligence was suggesting that children have been exposed to dangerous drug, whether by consumption or whether using as couriers or to traffic the drug. Here we are seeing clearly that the amendment, and Gart, you asked the question, how the law has been developed. This is one of the areas where it clearly specifies on a school bus, as I identify here, or on a school premises. Now, this resembles the original act, which talks about if someone is found in possession of a dangerous drug on or within 500 meters of a school.
Yes.
So if you notice how this amendment, it actually went to bolster that position in relation to where a person can be. So could you imagine that someone who is responsible for driving students to school, there's no way that person is entitled to have 30 grams on him. Because here this law is saying the person who has cannabis or cannabis resin in his possession on a school bus. So here it is that while you may have the opportunity to have 30 grams because it's decriminalized, in this particular status quo, you are now caught within the law. You cannot enjoy that decriminalization because you're on a school bus or you're on a school premises. Teachers and stakeholders, be very careful of this particular section.
So let me just take up in here. So if I have marijuana in my car, I carry my children to school, and police stops me and decide, just get a hunch. You have that marijuana. So could I be arrested for that because my children in the car?
Well, you're raising the point that I addressed earlier, that where I would like to see the law go. In your context, and it goes to Natasha's context as well, where there are certain things that has to be fleshed out. But you in your private vehicle, in the public space, which has to be properly treated with by the law. At this time, one can argue, okay, you are enjoying your private vehicle. Yes. That's the children in the car is your children.
Right.
Where I would like to go with that is that while you have it in a vehicle, where you have it in a vehicle, do you have it within the console where a child now could smell it, where a child could touch it, where a child could consume it? So I would like to see that both in home and in your vehicle, that it is properly handled and managed by the person who is possessing it. That is number one. Number two, number three, and this is again, it's similar to the point I was making before, Natasha, that a person who operates, navigates, or is in actual or physical control of any motor vehicle, aircraft, or ship whilst under the influence of cannabis also commits a criminal offense, $250,000 plus 5 years. Now, you see three stakeholders here?
Yes.
We are going on an aircraft and expecting the pilot to take us safely to a destination. Yes. But that pilot have the opportunity to enjoy 30 grams.
Right.
And we don't know whether that 30 grams over 12 hours will be 120 grams. But yet he's going now to take charge of an aircraft or a vessel, as the case may be, or a vehicle. The law has now come under the amendment to clearly identify that a person who operates, navigates, or is in actual or physical control of any motor vehicle, aircraft, or ship whilst under the influence of cannabis. So, really and truly, where's the balance? Can you really enjoy that 30 grams if you're about to fly in an hour time? Or 60 grams or 80 grams if you have to fly our aircraft in an hour, 2 hours time. So it put in great responsibility. So here it is, the law person felt happy. Yes, I have 30 grams. But I want us to read the depth of the legislation. That is not just having the opportunity to consume, to possess 30 grams. The consumption and link it to your role and responsibilities.
Two things, Corporal. First, does the 500-meter radius still apply to schools? Still apply, that's one. And two, how do police detect whether someone is under the influence of cannabis?
Two beautiful questions. I don't know whether you saw my areas that I recommended for reform, Natasha. And
No.
Gat, I don't know whether you all saw it. Maybe you all have prior intelligence. I'll have to go back and check to see whether there was a breach of my security. But you all are...
Not at all.
Yeah, it's funny because in the original legislation, you had someone who is found on school premises or within school premises, 500 meters of a school, will be deemed to have the drug for the purpose of trafficking.
Right.
And here it is now, you have now decriminalized 30 grams.
So Gary asking if you have a joint as well and in 500 perimeter of a school.
Well, that in fact brings the argument that needs to be fleshed out, that if you allow 30 grams on your person, because that's the legal amount that you can have, but you're within 500 meters of a school, is the section 5.7 of the Dangerous Drug Act where you are in possession of. Are you deemed to have it for the purpose of trafficking? Or the other argument is that should you go to if you have 31 grams now, you see the difference? So you were 30 grams within. They have now decriminalized that. So, okay, is it 5.7 applied? Or should we be saying now, if a person is in possession of 31 grams on a school premises or within 500 meters of a school premises, because you have gone beyond the legal amount? That's one argument, or two arguments. The second argument now, when you look at the amendment to the Dangerous Drug Act, what you're seeing, a person who is on a school bus or on a school premises who have dangerous drugs. So whether you will entitle the 30 or not, once you're on a school bus and you're on school premises, that's a no-no where the act is concerned, for my respectful reading. So, again, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, while we have an opportunity to enjoy some liberty, some privileges under the particular law and its consequential amendments, read the four corners of the legislation so you are not caught in a place where you are surprised. And I'm Gat and Natasha and to your colleagues in the studio, I want to thank you again for putting this topic or placing this topic in the way that we have placed it today. And I hope that it continues because, like in anything else, new legislation, people do not take the time to read it. They do not take the time to explain it. They do not understand the working of it. And even when you start to work it, you'll realize there's a name for what? To reshape certain areas, to ensure that what? There is certainty and the law is achieving its objective. So I wanted to address that. So we have addressed the smoking in public, the duty upon professionals and persons who may be using the road, the persons who are on school bus or buses as the case may be, on school premises. We have addressed that. Very, very serious. May I also go quickly onto the context of where even persons who are, and this is a very important area, persons who in law may have the legal authority to issue prescription for dangerous drug.
Thank you.
Or
Thank you for
pharmacists who are working under the direction of someone who has a license for dangerous drug. I want to also emphasize that the Dangerous Drug Act is also applicable to you, and it is very clear as to the duties, responsibilities, and obligations that a medical practitioner, a veterinary, a pharmacist, those persons are also governed by the Dangerous Drug Act and ought to act within the four corners of the law in relation to dangerous drugs.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to Dependency, and in studio we have Inspector.
Speak it into existence.
I'm not apologizing for that. We are speaking with Mr. Zaheer Ali, and you hear him on Beyond the Tape on a Wednesday, legally speaking. He's in studio with us this morning in the flesh, and he is really laying it down for us this morning. I hope you all are absorbing, and you can share this, please. For those of you on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Click on that bell, and when we go live, you'll always be notified. And on Facebook as well. Let's go to the children now, and you elaborate on this. Is there special protection for children under the law? Because when we do camps, And sometimes I would tell the school, we need to have a camp for parents, because these children will tell us that, yeah, but I just tell daddy don't light the joint when I smoke, when I'm doing my homework, but he just come by the table and light a joint and smoke. It's protection for children under the law, sir.
Garth and Natasha, sorry. If anything that I want to remain with the listening public, or the viewing public, as the case may be on Facebook, is the matters that we are speaking that impacts our children. Under the Children's Act, it has clearly identified that a person who exposes a child to a dangerous drug or a drug that has a similar effect. Now that goes smack into the point you were making, that daddy enjoying his 30 grams, but exposing that drug to that child home. And that's why I was so passionate about managing and regulating even how that drug is to be used or stored, that 30 gram that person is allowed, or the 4 trees as the case may be. So anybody who exposes a child to a dangerous drug, you will be caught within the Children's Act legislation, which is very severe in terms of both fine and custodial sentence.
Okay, let's go.
Secondly, a person who gives a child or causes a child to be given a dangerous drug, and that is without a medical practitioner's direction for that child's health. We're talking about illegally giving or causing a child to be given a dangerous drug, also attracts a very serious penalty, both fine and custodial sentence. And last, under the Children's Act, using a child to sell or be a courier for dangerous drug. Now, let me just pause on this particular point. It is public knowledge that we are seeing, or the intelligence is suggesting, that there's a lot of young people who are involved in organized crime and gang activity. We have also seen, Garth and Natasha, that the gang leaders and persons who are in position of authority in these gangs are exploiting these particular youngsters. Now, let me just take a spin off quickly, because, Garth, I know that you have a passion for counter-trafficking as well.
Yes.
Under the Counter-Trafficking Act, to show you how this issue of dangerous drug is just as important, a form of exploitation is using a child to take illegal items within borders or across borders. Let me make that point. So when we are looking at fighting crime and where people are seeing drugs, okay, so there's one aspect of the child being used as a courier. Have one examined to see whether the child now, there's an aggravated element where that child is being trafficked. Because you're using the child to exploit the child to move illegal items. Yep. So it's not only the situation of attracting penalties under the Dangerous Drug Act and its amendments, you're also seeing possible implications if you are diligent to look into the Trafficking in Persons Act. So persons who are inclined to be using young children to be selling drugs or couriers and so forth, understand that you will not only be looking at penalties under the Dangerous Drugs Act, but you are looking at into the Trafficking in Persons Act. So I wanted to put a little perspective of human trafficking into this context as well.
Yes. Well said.
So basically, in a nutshell, those are the 3 instances where the Children's Act have moved to protect children from the exposure of drugs. And we have seen before where I've spoken on the Dangerous Drug Act, where being on a school bus within 500 meters of the school, those things are also additional protection to ensure that the drug is nowhere close to a child. So could you imagine, Garth, that you are saying on a school bus or on school premises or within 500 school premises, but now you have given the parent of that child 30 grams to be at home? Shouldn't that be justification to place a responsibility on the parent to ensure that that drug, when it's not on the person, which is the parent, it should be locked tightly in a safe? So that a child wouldn't end up in school saying, look, you know, I find this 2 thing home. Daddy leave it on the couch and it's in the school compound. And they're deciding to test it. So we cannot give or decriminalize. Give persons an opportunity or a license and not put conditions on our license, in summary.
So, excuse me, Natasha.
Yeah.
No, so if a security guard or a principal, a teacher catches a child in school with marijuana, as we know have happened before, do we have a trace back to where this child got this from, so that the person who gave this child this will be shown, for the high jump?
Brilliant question, Garth. And I'll say brilliant question with this to my fellow colleagues in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. which is entrusted with the responsibility for quality, diligent investigations. And bearing in mind that there is a director of public prosecutions where children are concerned. So once a child is at the age to attract criminal liability or presume to know or appreciate his or her conduct and can attract criminal liability, it doesn't end there. Because you are quite rightly identifying how did the child came into possession of this drug. You want to hear, you want to do diligent interviews. You want to be able to have consultation with the DPP to say, okay, is it this one of the situations that the DPP can grant an immunity to this child? Look at the rehabilitation of this child, but use the evidence of this child to probably treat with an organized syndicate or to deal with delinquent parents who need help.
Because normally we'll hear the child get suspended, and that's it. That's the end of the story, right?
That's correct.
Or
So
go
we
to
need
the
to
criminal court or whatever.
Yes.
But there must have been an adult involved.
And I want to totally agree with you all. So while we are looking at, yes, it's a contravention, yes, that child may be in need of care and protection, may need to be rehabilitated, the greater public interest is to understand the source of that particular drug.
Thank you.
Or who may have exposed that child, whether it be a parent, whether it be a community leader, a gang leader, whoever may have exposed that child. So hence why I called upon respectfully to my colleagues in the TTPS that when they come across a situation like that, ensure that they seek advice and do diligent investigations to really deal with this in a 360 position.
Thank you very
Agreed. Corporal, one question that you skillfully avoided. I don't want to say avoided it, but it has been reiterated by one of our YouTube viewers. And she asked, the legal limit of alcohol can be tested. How can you know if someone is under the influence of cannabis?
A good question. And at this present point in time, while the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act talk about a person who may be driving under the influence of a drink or drug, that's as generic as it is at this present point in time. But the current amendment to the Dangerous Drug Act, if you're asking or you're saying that persons who are under the influence of a dangerous drug, and you're looking at things like negligence and professional malpractice and so forth, the question is, I would want to ask, is whether in fact we are equipped from an operational perspective, whether we have the instruments to be able to subject people to be, or like how we have giving a breathalyzer sample or use even blood sample. What are the processes in place to ensure that we bring alive the legislation? And hence why I'm saying that as a society, the enactment of the law is one step. Enforcement and or preparation to put the law into action is another important aspect. So to answer that question, I am not in a position to say whether in fact we are fully equipped to be able to administer that particular section. And I hope that if the authorities is listening, if we are not, we cannot have a legislation or a piece of law in the law books and unable to use it because of a deficiency in the apparatus that is required to move that particular process.
Absolutely. And that's the reason why I asked, because I know that there is that gap does exist. And if we, as you rightfully say, if we want to legislate against certain things, we must be prepared to equip the enforcement agency to do its job and enforce the law.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that that's the only way we can do justice to our society. And if, as I said, let's go back into where we started in terms of international law. If we recognize the significance of this from an international context, and the international community call squarely on the United Nations members to take the necessary actions. The necessary actions go beyond legislative. You must be providing the resources to put the law into action. And on the other side, we spoke about the preventative aspect. And this show, this particular program, I commended it very early as to we found importance in ensuring that if we are looking at the reduction and deterrence and building awareness, this is where we need to go to have that balanced approach. So we are not only looking at the aspect of the strict or the hard arm enforcement, but are we effectively engaging the schools? Are we effectively engaging members of the public? Are we effectively engaging the churches and the mosques and the mandirs and calling on these persons to play their role as well? Are we going into we saw, as I said before, this issue of professionals and professional misconduct. Are we going into those various stakeholders, the ministries and so forth, and really bringing alive this particular legislation to understand the importance? Because, not to digress, but in recent weeks, we saw our Honorable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago and the region have looked at or are looking at crime as a public health issue. What better example do we have from looking at dangerous drug? Typical example of the public health issue. Whether you're looking at public health from a consequential perspective where persons who are consuming personally, they are having an impact on the health system because they need treatment, they need assistance. Or on the other way, they are consuming the drugs and they're involving in crime, inflicting harm on other persons, home invasions.
And to add to that, there are a number of young people now. If you check the stats of St. Anne's, and I don't know why St. Anne's will release it, but we have a number of youngsters under 20 being admitted to St. Anne's from this first pull of marijuana.
Well, very frightening statistics, very frightening.
I swear, we get in the calls and parents keep reaching out to us. What do we do? What do we do? I have a 15-year-old child in St. Anne's right now. You know, a mother told us.
Somebody gave him marijuana to use, which may have been laced with something we don't know.
You don't know. And we're not getting, if these drugs are being tested to find out what it was in the marijuana. But then, and I would like you to elaborate on this too, please, Mr. Ali, to parents who understand that your child's brain is not fully developed until it reaches the age of 25.
Yep.
There are people who giving their children marijuana and alcohol to use, Mr. Ali.
Well, God, all I will say, based on the law, that parents who may be inclined to expose their children, and in the case of where they're exposing them to a dangerous drug, I want to respectfully caution those children, those parents, or guardians, or even relatives, or whoever it may be, that you may be bordering on your right to liberty and your right on freedom of movement, or your hard-earned money, because you'll be attracting very serious consequences. And I want to also say from a soft-hand perspective that these children are children who are not only the future of Trinidad and Tobago, but they came from you. If you understand the impact of dangerous drug, why are you exposing them? Why are you impacting their health? What contribution are you making to society when you're exposing a child to a dangerous drug? So, parents and guardians, be very careful as to what you are doing with your children or the company that you are placing your children in, which may be a company that is exposing young people to dangerous drugs and other ills of society.
Carl, as you raise that point, it brings me back to the show we did a few weeks ago. Remember John? Folks? Who lived in a home with a father who was abusing crack cocaine, using it in front of him, using it with other persons in the home. And this child, as a result, was forced to raise himself. And the impact that had on his life, he is now in prison.
Yeah.
Well, Natasha, let me respond to you immediately there. Why are we discussing dangerous drug and particular sections of the Children's Act that may be promoting the protection of children? There's also a part in the Children's Act, and maybe we discuss this on another time, Gat, with you and Natasha, but it's important based on the point you're making, that persons who have the responsibility for children and places that child in a situation where that child is suffering or likely to suffer harm. And harm has been defined under the Children's Act as very wide, looking at the overall development of that child from a psychological, from an educational, it's very broad. You can be, again, placing yourself to attract criminal liability. So, Natasha, happy that you raised that issue. So, I do not know whether, in fact, citizens sometimes recognize how important it is to not be ignorant where the law is concerned. Because it's only when you are called upon, then you understand how serious, how strict the law is. So please, seek knowledge. Seek knowledge. Seek knowledge.
Before we run out of time, folks, after this break, when we return, we're going to show you that man who attempted to drug that woman in a nightclub. And also a citizen here who was arrested at a nightclub right in Woodbrook there, tried to brandish a firearm after he consumed a drug called alcohol. And we tend to forget that a drug, any mood or mind-altering substance, is a drug. Although alcohol is legal, it's still a drug. whether we want to admit it or not. So after this break, we'll return. Those of you who just joined us, you joined us late, but you're listening to Mr. Ali, Zaheer Ali, an attorney at law for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. He's attached to the Special Investigations Unit. And you hear him and see him on Beyond the Tape every Wednesday, and his segment, Legally Speaking, and you would see him with Superintendent Alexander and Marlon Hopkinson. Let's go to this break, and when we return, we're going to see, for those of you who party and hearty this vacation, especially your children, I want you to see how easy it is for your child to be drugged with a date rape drug, or could possibly be trafficked after that person passes out, because there's a trend and there's a method in which this happens, right? So let's go to this break quickly, and we'll be back with Mr. Ali. Stay right there.
Ah, boy. I feel I'm gonna buy myself a senorita tonight.
Nah. You know you might be promoting slavery.
Slavery? Mm-hmm. What are you talking about?
Hey, modern day slavery or human trafficking is just what some of these people just do. You know some of these women were tricked to come here? Some are held against their will, abused, and even beaten. Most times the girls don't even see any of the money that is paid for them. And every night, they just have to come out looking nice and sexy for somebody like you. Human trafficking is a serious problem and a serious crime. Persons who solicit commercial sex services may be contributing to human trafficking. A message from the Counter-Trafficking Unit of the Ministry of National Security.
Hello.
Hi, this is Patricia Kent from HMP London. Can I speak to Miss Sheila, please?
This is Miss Sheila.
Hi, I've got an important call for you. Please hold the line.
Mommy, it's Sherry.
Oh God, Sherry, we looking for you all the time. 3 weeks now. Where you going?
Mommy, according to Talia, I get locked up. I had drugs in my luggage and I'm in England right now. In jail.
Oh God, Sherry, what? What you do? How you reach there? Oh God, how we gonna do?
Oh God, Mommy, don't cry. It'll be alright. Sorry.
Eye on Dependency. Reality radio at its best every Sunday on I 95.5 FM. Don't miss it.
Eye on Dependency with Garth and Natasha.
Reality radio at its best, where every life is a biography.
Sundays at 10 a.m. and exclusively on I 95.5 FM.
And streamed live on the Eye on Dependency Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Thank you very much for staying with us. This has been a very interesting program with Corporal Zaheer Ali, and of course we continue to advocate for his promotion, but nonetheless he has shared some very vital information with us and with you this morning about the law as it pertains to dangerous drugs, including alcohol, which is not considered a dangerous drug, but as we all know, it is a mood and mind altering substance. Thank you to those of you who are tuned in on I-95 and on our Facebook and YouTube channel.
Yes, thank you so much. And before we go to that video, we want you, and we'll describe it to those of you who are listening, what is happening in front of us right now. A man tries to drug a woman in a club.
Yes.
And she didn't realize that he tried to do it until they were reviewing the video and realized that, hey, this man slipped something in a drink. Mm-hmm. And so we want you to see that, especially to those of you who, so I saw something the other night too on a mother and daughter fighting in a club, outside of a club, rolling in the drain. And and this
substances must have been present, right?
Of course, but this daughter throwing hands on her mother, and we have reached a stage in our society right now where honor thy mother and thy father like it no longer exists, and to see a mother fighting with her daughter in public and somebody saying, oh, leave them like mother and daughter. And I saying, that's, wow.
And nobody tried to party fight?
People tried, but the daughter was pulling away and running back to beat the mother. And I'm saying, but in my time, you had to have 9 lives to try that. To hit your mother, to even stoops at my mother. Listen.
Yeah, but God, now the world has changed, huh?
Yeah,
no
but
longer.
And probably this is why we're experiencing all this craziness that's going on right now. You listen, if I stoops at my mother when I was growing up, Natasha, I would not have met you. I'm telling you that. I would not have met you because.
What do you mean?
But she would have shortened my life. You crazy, stoops.
Okay, I know, catch.
Mr. Ali, you know that we grew up like that? You crazy? I had it at that time, one kind of slip out, another player soccer me. I'm going to pretend it wasn't a stoops. You crazy? Stoops at my mother. Now children stand up and cursing their mother. Yeah. You believe this?
Yeah, I believe it.
Look, Mr. Ali, we want to take some calls, right? But we have a question for you before we go to that video where we're going to show you again a young lady, a man attempted to drug a woman in a club, and then there was an arrest by our police in a club right here over the last couple of days. We're going to show you that. But how, if any, does the current law impact persons who were charged or convicted prior to the amendments in 2029? That's important because there are people even in prison.
Are you putting in 2029?
2019,
right?
Yes, 2019. Yes, because remember it was said too that the amendment of the laws would assist those in prison who were in there for small offences, who were on remand, and their families were looking forward to that. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, another important area, Garth, in terms of how the amendment, in terms of the significant changes, and there are basically 3 parts, and I will want to address one part, and the reason I'm addressing one part is that the other 2 parts, in my respectful view, having read it, it is also subject to a review in terms of whether, in fact, it is properly pleaded and accurate or can stand the legal scrutiny. So I wouldn't go to to open members of the public to it and know it becomes subject to an amendment. But the area that I would like to identify is that persons who would have been charged previously for not more than 100 grams of cannabis or not more than 14 grams of cannabis recent, who was basically convicted and would have had a criminal record. Remember, you'll want to look at the legislation where one of the big arguments was that young persons who may have been charged for possession, got convicted. On their criminal record, you've seen a record for dangerous drugs.
Yes.
Yeah. And when they apply for employment, the employer will respond in a particular way, or most. So what this particular amendment would have attempted to do is that persons who would have been charged previously and convicted for not more than 100 grams of cannabis or not more than 14 grams of cannabis. Now, this is going smack into the tier system that we have, with the 30 to 60, 60 to 100, and vice versa, 5 to 10, 10 to 14 in terms of the cannabis recent. So persons who have been convicted, they have the opportunity to apply to the Commissioner of Police to expunge that criminal record. And additionally, to apply for a pardon under Section 87 of the Constitution, to have that pardon being handed down to them. So that particular area I like to identify because that speaks to matters before the amendment, but also in the context of specifically, and I want to repeat, not more than 100 grams of cannabis or not more than 14 grams of cannabis if persons were convicted for the dangerous drug with those amounts. Right. They have the application to have their criminal record expunged by the Commissioner of Police and to apply for a pardon under Section 87 of the Constitution. The other 2 contexts that I mentioned in terms of where the offense might be discharged or where a fine to be handed down as opposed to a custodial sentence, I want to be very careful because those things, in my respectful view, need further review because there are some legal arguments and constraints that may be attracted to it. So the criminal record is what I will deal with prior to coming into the amendments coming into effect.
And that applies to possession only?
Well, if you look at the amount that they're identifying, most certainly.
Definitely.
Unless,
Possession.
there's no issue there about trafficking.
Right.
Because those amounts, not more than 100 grams. If we look at even a demon, you have to have 1 kilogram of cannabis or 165 grams of cannabis resin to be deemed to have it for trafficking. So even this amount here is strict possession we are speaking about, not the trafficking at all.
Let's go to that video, short man. Video A. And let's I want you to see how easy it is or what these perpetrators are doing. Some of them work in tandem with bartenders, or some of them work on their own.
And he's looking suspect from the beginning, even after it happened. And she was like confused. He was just like normal, trying to act normal, but he wasn't looking normal at all.
He slipped a Mickey in her drink.
Yeah.
Thank God the camera was facing her, and when he realized he was caught, he spilled the drink on her. Let's go to that video.
Video.
Dependency, and we're listening to Independence. Okay, and while Shortman is trying to hook it up, we're going to take your calls in a moment if you have any questions.
Now this
right, let's go.
is one of the saddest, most dangerous things you will see. A woman catches a man, according to her, spiking her drink. I want you to see the video. Here it is.
As this guy put something in my drink at a club.
Was appalled because he spilled the drink on her, but she didn't know that there was something in her drink until she looked at the video, and but I think probably the bartender saw him because you notice the bartender pulled the drink away from her.
The one that spilled,
yes, and her drink, and
No, I think that must have been another. Party goer. I don't think.
Show it again one more time. Oh, she's explaining.
She's gonna explain.
So I would know better than to make light of a situation like that. But for context, in the moment I did not know that he had put something in my drink. I just watched the video back today, and I was like, oh my god, I did not see that this had happened. In the moment I was just really upset that he spilled the drink on me, and also because throughout the whole night he was trying to dance with me or touch me or just following me around, and my friend had to tell him to stop several times. So when the spill happened, I was just really frustrated because almost the whole night we've been telling him to stop and he didn't. So it was not staged, and I guess it seems like he was very obvious now in hindsight, and I understand you should watch your drink. But because the drink was right in front of me and my phone was right in front of me, I just assumed the level of safety, which clearly I shouldn't have. So that's why I didn't, I obviously didn't take my eyes off the drink or turn around. It was right in front of me, right in front of the phone at all times. And the phone was very visible, so I felt that was also a deterrent for something like that happening. But yeah, I am fine though, because after he spilled the drink, I didn't take the second drink. I just walked away after security came. So fortunately I was fine, and then I left shortly after that. I went home.
Now, folks, I want to remind you again that we live in a different era, and there are perpetrators out there who are waiting to pounce on people. We have human trafficking now in the mix. Anytime you go out, you had your first or second drink, and you start to feel dizzy, you start to feel nauseous, you start to lose your sense of self. Ask for help immediately, please, because we have some sick folks out there who's waiting to hurt you.
And to address those sick folks, who are primarily men, can we please shift the focus to the perpetrators and ask men, or demand that men be better now. Please.
Be better.
Why are
yes.
you trying to drug someone in a place where she is having fun, enjoying herself with her friends, and you are trying to be a creep, unsuspecting? You try to slip something into her drink so that you could do what? Assault her afterwards when she becomes incapacitated?
Or sell her.
No, this kind of
Or
behavior
trafficking.
is unacceptable, and you should not be doing it. I hope they find this man and deal with him.
Speaking of which, police found this one. So let's go to our situation in Trinidad and Tobago that happened in a nightclub right in Woodbrook there recently, where he was arrested. But look at the behavior. Short man cleaned this up for us. So let's go to that and let's see how the police responded after they were called. And this guy has a legal firearm, right? He has a
Should he be allowed to carry this away?
So here you see starting to turn over stuff. Probably for them to the listeners could hear Gary.
A few moments later.
Are you from Vegas?
Of course, I'm from T6 Marvelous and investigative journalist.
I know what I'm here for.
Questions? Chance? So you're going to put on license fire for people.
So what's happening here now, folks who listening on radio? He was just kicking over the club, turning over everything in his sight, cussing everybody while reaching for his firearm. The police was called, and here the police now are putting him in handcuffs to go away with him. Mr. Ali, any advice to firearm owners and club owners about coming into club with firearm?
Well, that's my comments are not geared towards this particular video. I just want to make that clear this morning. But generally speaking, in terms of persons who are entrusted with firearm users license,
right?
Like we were discussing the Dangerous Drug Act, there's a Firearms Act. There's the legal framework of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service that governs persons who are entrusted with a firearm user's license and by extension a firearm. Yes. And just by way of example, a simple breach of the peace, while you are in possession of that firearm, and here the word I'm using, a breach of the peace, it means that there's some act of criminality on your part. Simple breach, maybe an obscene language, right? Maybe a throwing missile, I'm just saying. Maybe a simple assault. Those are very serious circumstances that can cause you to be disarmed or be your firearm user's license being revoked immediately and the firearm taken away from you. So I want to identify that having a firearm user's license shouldn't be something that you feel that you're on cloud nine and you're untouchable. So that's the first point I want to make. Secondly, with reference to places that, and in the context where alcohol might be a prevailing circumstances, whether if not through you, but through other persons, you have to be thinking tactically that if you are intending to go and enjoy yourself in a place, even if the public may have access, whether it be through a payment or whether generally, to go and have a social time or social event, you ought to be very tactical in terms of going with your firearm. Even if you are saying that you are not consuming alcohol, this environment is one that is ripe and conducive, which can easily bring you into a situation where you breach the peace.
Thank you.
And put other person's life in danger.
Yes.
And thirdly, let me identify a particular section of the Firearms Act. A person, and it will now complement the Dangerous Drug Act, a person who is in possession of a firearm and firearm user's license, who is under the influence of, or drunk, I should say. Let me use the word as the law has it. Drunk or under the influence of a dangerous drug. You see the dangerous drug coming in again? So it's not only, so that negligence we spoke about earlier. You have a firearm user's license, you have a firearm, but you also have the opportunity to enjoy 30 grams of cannabis. But over the last 12 hours, you enjoy 150 grams, and then in the morning you move out with your firearm. And then you have the situation occurs that you discharge that firearm. When they check that you are neglected to observe the firearm acts and regulations. So a person who under the influence of a dangerous drug or who is drunk in the context of alcohol, you will be committing a criminal offense under the Firearms Act. So be very careful. There's a lot of stipulations in place to guide and control. And if you applied for a fuel to protect yourself and your family, ensure that is what it's being used for, and you're not exploiting or exposing yourself to vulnerabilities for your license to be revoked, for your gun to be taken away, or for you to be charged. And I go into the extent, even being charged for murder, if you are not making proper decisions, because that is deadly force that you're in possession of. So I don't know if that answers your question, God.
Yes, it does. It does. And I'm so lucky. I mean, I don't drink at all, and I try to jump through hoops to get an FUL. And here it is, this clown has one and looking to get it revoked. It's just so stupid. Well, let's take some calls, 622-3937. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. And please make your comments short and quick so that we can get some calls in for 622-3937. Hello, good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, sir. Sorry. God, Natasha, great program. Mr. Ali?
Could you take off your...
Right, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Ali, I have been monitoring you a long while, and I'm listening to you on Beyond the Teeth, and it seems like a really dedicated man. Could you tell us, you said earlier on, I know you don't want to call no names, but could you tell us if parents who send in the children, the buses I'm speaking about, could you tell us, the general public, is that if these fellas and them who are driving these buses, you come over them before smoking marijuana? That's one of my questions to you. And the second one, I would like to know what you all are doing concerning the men who are molesting these little young girls who are 14, 13, 12 going down. What it is, are they coming back out and bail to destroy more children? Thank you.
All right, let's take another. I'll write it down and we'll ask Ms. Ali to answer before we wrap up. Good morning.
Hi, Corporal Ali.
Good morning.
Gat and Natasha, good day.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning. I say no to any sort of dangerous drug use which is not for the health of body and mind. And I would always ask, why is it allowed by those in authority? So I am saying, may drug users seek help to be released from this danger. And when the temptation comes, people just say no. Say, Lord, save me. Because the devil there setting his trap to destroy. So I'm saying, watch out, be on guard. We need help. Those in authority need to be guided correctly. So wrong has to be stopped, corrected, or prevented. So I pray for this country that there will be the wise leaders to lead the country all right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
622-3937. 622-3937. Good morning. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Quickly, go ahead. Hello, good morning.
Hello. God, morning.
Morning.
The caller I called just now before the female caller. She just called and talked, but she said the drug, but I hope she ain't referring too much about the marijuana. No, the marijuana thing, but the point that why I called to say that I never hear she quick call and talk about all these women who put one set of ring all over their forehead.
All right, Larry. All right. Hello, good morning.
Hi, Larry.
Yes. Morning, that and
Talking about me
Let
there.
me just put on my radio.
Good morning.
This topic hot, man. We should have thank God, for having me clean and sober today.
Yes.
Thank God the reboot house, a couple of years now, till I even lost count. But God, I know you say use drugs too because I know you're good, and we from South.
Yes.
And in we days, Well, the few madmen it had, they say they used to overread and overstudy, and they never say they take cocaine or MX or Mandrax and all that. I 63, so that was the drugs in my early days when I was all 14, 15 and things coming up, Mandrax, MX and all them kind of thing coming up, eh?
Mm-hmm.
But if you could, or they can get in contact with the Ministry of Education and take them school children and tours in the madhouse for me, please, now.
Good
Take
idea.
them on tours in the madhouse.
St. Anne's.
Got to have a little fella I know, donkey years in the madhouse. He had so gone. All he does ask every day is, hey, my mommy come. She bring bread and juice. Whole day, every day for the past 30 years. He just want to know if he mommy come.
Wow.
Carry these children and them in sentence on some Thursday, please. And good job, Mr. Officer Ali. Mr. Ali.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're on the ball.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much.
Hello, good morning. 622-3937. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
I live in an apartment building where there's cigarette smoking, loads of cigarette smoking, and sometimes marijuana, and children living on the compound. Is there a law that prohibits that? And it's also near to a daycare.
All right. We'll take one more and then I'll ask Ms. Ali to answer. Hello, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Gat and Natasha.
Morning, Kathy.
And that esteemed gentleman.
Good morning.
Oh, boy, he is so good. But Gat and Natasha, I will say that this decriminalization of marijuana is a gateway to the royal jail. It's a whole setup. It needs to be revisited. Everybody who know me know I against that. That whole marijuana stuff. You know?
Yes.
So I think it needs to be revisited.
All right. Thank you, Kathy.
Then. Thank you.
School buses.
For the caller that spoke, inquired about the school buses, I personally have not come across the drivers being exposed or having any criminal record for dangerous drug. But I understand the point, and I want to extend your point where persons who are entrusted with or becoming close to students should be closely scrutinized to ensure that they are not exposing or they are the proper example for persons who may be accompanying them on those school buses. So that's in response to that. I just want to advise that stricter measures are in place for persons who have the responsibility for transporting school children on those buses.
Correct.
Absolutely.
What's the other question?
About molestation. I don't know if you want to talk about
people
who are arrested for that and charged. And
well, in terms of the molestation of young children, I want to also indicate that the Criminal Investigation Division and to a certain extent the Counter Trafficking Unit and the Special Victims Unit, they have very, very serious responsibilities, and I want to urge them through you to continue to be diligent to investigate those matters to ensure that we put a dent to those issues, because they are very serious issues as well.
Yes, because we wanted to talk to, and we hope to get them in here, because we wanted to talk about the sexual offenders registry, and which unit that falls under, and let people understand if your name end up on that sexual offenders registry, what you're in for the rest of your life. Yep. And then the apartment building, the lady asked about.
Well, I think before the apartment building, I think someone inquired about the issue of the whole perspective or the whole law on cannabis, and whether in fact we should be decriminalizing cannabis. And all I'll say, while I have my personal view, which I would not express, I'm speaking from a legal context, from a professional context. There are many different stakeholders or different positions to the issue, and I think that it wouldn't hurt to put the legislation back for a review and do some thorough consultation with different stakeholders, especially now that we have some time. We may have some data to look at to see whether in fact the legislation has progressed the society or whether we are facing more challenges in relation to the decriminalization of marijuana. So I want to answer it like that, but definitely I do not want to emphasize or demonstrate that every stakeholder have a right to be heard, and the law-making process should be taken into consideration, every stakeholder in Trinidad and Tobago, and then we come up for what might be in the best interest of the majority.
Good morning.
And the last one, sorry?
Yeah, that's well, smoking in the apartment.
Right, the
building.
smoking in the apartment. We spoke about that earlier, Gat, in terms of persons who are exposing children, and she spoke about children in the apartment to a dangerous drug. That in itself subject to a report and investigation, and pending the evidence, persons could be charged because that is a form of exposing a child to a dangerous drug.
People in this country are so ignorant boy, that you will tell an adult about that and they curse you.
Yep.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning to you, Gat and Natasha. Thanks for the program. You all are brilliant, but you have a brilliant mind in your midst.
Oh, without
My
a doubt.
thing is, the parent who complained to you about a young child, 15 years old, who end up in St. Anne's. I want to know what the law going to do. You want to tell me that the parents have not been observing and vigilant with their children to see that something strange was happening? It didn't come and happen overnight. Because in my family, we had a family member who was behaving very strangely. We were very young, and we knew that something was up. But the family members, the elders, were so ignorant, didn't know what was happening. So we laughed at them and their ignorance, not knowing as children, not knowing the harm. So I want to ask the parent, I know in the developed world, the children will be taken away from the parents. So we have to maybe go at parents to exercise due diligence. And when you see something is not right with the character of that child, you start to investigate. Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. Hello, good morning. Hello.
Morning.
Hello, good morning. Good morning.
I have to blame the Prime Minister for letting go this marijuana.
Yes.
We're hardly hearing you,
Hardly
sir.
hearing you, sir. Hello, good morning. 6223937. Hello, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
I want to agree totally with that revisiting that law, decriminalization of marijuana. So I think it serves no useful purpose. Because the law didn't make any legitimate means of acquiring the 30 grams and the 4 plants. So where do they go? By the same pushers, by the traffickers to get the money. I thought that law was intended to give a reprieve for those who are the one stick, to give them a new clean sheet to get employed and so on. And then you cut it off. So why allow it? It is just so, ridiculous. And all those persons in Parliament sat down and no one thought about the effect it's having now. So I think it needs to be revisited and revoked. Because exposing more people get arrested with more than 4 plants and possession. Where they're going to smoke? They can't smoke in the public, so they're going home to influence the children. And, it's such a bad law. Kopalali, keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. We take one more. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
The law is a nice law, man. All you think about a former Prime Minister and all take was smoking. They find it by them.
Thank you very much, sir, for calling. You see, former Prime Minister, let's be discussing. So let's stay on track now. Keep it on track now, all right?
Yeah,
to the person who asked, one more. Hello, good morning.
Hi, morning.
Morning.
Hey, how you doing, God? This is Google here.
Who is this?
Google.
Hi, morning.
We're going on that. We're out of time, but I just wanted to touch.
Google.
Yeah.
Yes, morning, son. What's up,
Morning,
my brother?
sir. I cool. I just wanted to touch base with you because the conversation that you're having is really needed. Let me tell you why, quickly, in a nutshell. Yesterday, I would have taken my son to C3, and really young people there.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were vaping, a lot of them were doing a lot of things that I got telling you, I was totally out of it. I said to myself, I need to get myself more familiarized with what's happening with these youths, boy. These young people are out there. They are out there, God. Totally out there. Drinking, smoking, doing the things that I wouldn't even dream to do at that age.
Yeah, boy. And adults encouraging them, and adults right around them watching them.
Yeah, I tell you, I would have left my son 1 minute, tell him to stand up, because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So I went to see it for myself. And I was like, wow, this is not what we want our society to muster and to blossom into.
No, my brother.
So I am saying to you, my brother, I think we need to meet up. We had to talk. I need to get more involved because this is crazy.
Thank you,
Have a
Google.
good one, man.
Thank you, my brother.
Yeah,
thanks
that's
for
the
listening.
one
Thanks for
thing
calling.
We didn't touch on is the vaping phenomenon. I mean, I know it's not doesn't fall under the TTPS's purview, but it certainly is an avenue for the abuse of dangerous drugs through cannabis related oils. So it's definitely a topic that we will bring more attention to.
Mr. Ali, you know, we cannot express how grateful we are, how thankful we are for you being here with us this morning. You left an indelible mark. I'm sure the lawmakers, especially who are listening to you this morning, would have learned something from you. And we really, really thank you. Commissioner, Ms. Archie, we have
promotion here.
Yes, we have a budding inspector here. And, you know, as I said, he was in the military. He would have been a commissioned officer already without a doubt. After 14 years, I have a problem calling this man corporal. He's way beyond that. And we want to thank him so much. Mr. Ali, your closing comments, please.
Well, thanks, God, thanks, Natasha. Thanks to your colleagues in the studio. I want to say it again, as I indicated, it was a pleasure, a privilege to be here to share this conversation with you all for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and most importantly, the young children of Trinidad and Tobago. I want to urge you all to continue the good work. I think that these are the sort of programs that will give a wider cross-section of society opportunity to be heard, and for the lawmakers to really appreciate really what the law should be, what it should stand for, and we should all be looking at what's in the best interest of Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to leave you all with the peace and blessings of Almighty God.
You're welcome, most welcome.
Thank
And we
you
have
so
major
much.
news up next with Ms. Janelle Wilson. But before we go, the person asked about Sheldon Aberdeen. Yes, he'll be back the first Sunday in August with another very special guest. I'll just give you a hint. He's a doctor now. But you're going to be here. He's going to be here in studio. I'm Natasha, Ali. Thank you so much once again, Gary. And to those of you, and you could visit our Facebook page and answer any questions that, you know, that we couldn't answer, could never answer to the public, all right?
Sure, I'll take a look at it.
Major news up next with Ms. Janelle Wilson. Have a good afternoon.
Broadcasting from Port of Spain, Trinidad, this is the most influential name in radio, I-95.5. Live local coverage you can depend on. This is News Center 5 at noon.
Police probe 3 weekend murders. A fruit vendor in St. Augustine is the latest victim. Who will the proposed vetted unit within the TTPS be reporting to? A question to the Prime Minister from the opposition UNC. PEP leader vows to shut down Police Complaints Authority and the Professional Standards Bureau if elected into office. And in Jamaica, another push for the age of sex